everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I am Brenda Victoria Castillo, President and CEO of the National Hispanic Media Coalition, a civil and human rights nonprofit organization. Some of the scariest times in world history have been when countries tap into fascist acts of banning books. One of the most infamous dictators in modern history, Adolf Hitler, kept people in line by making sure they were uneducated. His main act was to burn books he deemed unnecessary. He made sure that those books were banned in stores, at schools, and in anywhere else people sought knowledge. Today's United States is heading down a similar path.
2 Missouri state senators are being accused of symbolically burning books after videos show them using flamethrowers to torch empty cardboard boxes at a local freedom festival.
Reading books is fundamental to our existence. It's one of the oldest forms of entertainment that gives people knowledge. It shapes our spirit. Yet most importantly, it teaches readers empathy. Empathy towards communities the reader may not be educated about. As an indigenous Mexican-American little girl growing up in East Los Angeles, my father knew there were limited opportunities for me. But he understood that books meant knowledge and knowledge meant power. So he introduced me to the library with unlimited books. It was like going into a candy store for me. It was books that got me into college through the university system, and it's college that has helped me lead me to where I am today. Today's panel and conversation is in an effort to celebrate resilience and freedom to seek out knowledge that we stand to lose through banning books. On behalf of NHMC, I want to express my gratitude to you who have joined us today here in the panel, and also the viewers who are tuning in to NHMC's community building. I would like to welcome each of our guests and have them introduce ourselves. Anthony?
Hey everyone, my name's Anthony Ocampo. I'm happy to be here. I'm a sociology professor at Cal Poly Pomona. I'm also a writer, write about immigration, LGBTQ communities, people of color. And again, thank you for inviting me.
Pickle.
Hi, my name is Pickle. I'm so excited to be here today. I am the drag laureate of the City of West Hollywood, as well as running the LA branch of an organization called Drag Story Hour. We read books to kids in libraries, bookstores, museums, anywhere that there's a love of reading. And I'm so excited to share my love of reading with everyone today and hear what y'all have to say.
Thank you, Pickle. Carrie.
Great. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Carrie Bloxson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer at Hachette Book Group, which is one of the Big Five book publishers. Prior to Hachette, I was the interim CEO and Chief Marketing Officer of DoSomething.org, which is the largest social impact organization for young people in social change. So I have a lot of activism in my blood. And I grew up in a small New England town. And I frequented the library often. And I personally found a lot of strength and optimism in books, and just being able to expand my own worldview through the stories that I read. So books have been incredibly transformative in my life and my interest and my passion in my own work. And I'm deeply inspired by the role that books and literacy have played and continue to play in creating an entry point into a thriving and equitable cultural landscape. So thanks for having me.
Of course, Carrie. Allison?
Hi, I'm so glad to be with everyone this morning. I am the managing director of PEN America's Los Angeles office. PEN America is a national organization that unites writers and readers to celebrate the written word, but also to protect the freedoms that make it possible. We've been on the front lines of the work to fight book banning and to advocate on behalf of writers and readers and parents and teachers and librarians across the country. Like you, Brenda and Carrie, like I was taught by my grandfather grandfather, an immigrant, that the library was the most important, the most democratic institution we had. My access to books at that library not only helped me to discover myself, but to discover worlds I couldn't imagine. And to see those rights being threatened by a small vocal minority is something we all have to pay attention to and fight against. So I'm so glad to be a part of today's conversation.
Thank you, Allison. And Ingrid?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ingrid Rojas Contreras, and I am the author of Fruit of the Drunken Tree. And my last was the Pulitzer Prize finalist, The Man Who Could Move Clouds. And I have an essay. I'm a contributing author in this anthology, Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed, which was banned. And yeah, I just want to echo everyone's love for libraries and just what libraries mean to us. When I first came to the US in 2002, libraries were, where I found solace, and they were where I found books, and they were where I, even kind of fell asleep in desks in corners, and where I wrote little bits of what ended up becoming my books. And they were just, more importantly, the place where I discovered voices that, echoed my experience, and also experiences that I wasn't familiar with, and just widened my whole world.
So let's talk about, and this is coming out the week of October the 1st, which is Banned Books Awareness Week. And I know some of you are expanding it to the whole month because it's such an important topic. So let's talk a little bit about the history of banning books. And I mean, I can't believe that we're here in 2023 and some leaders are banning books and states are considering it. And, it's scary. It's dangerous. Does anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, Brenda, I was thinking about your introduction and how banning books is hardly a new thing, not just in Germany, but in the United States as well, during the times of slavery, Reconstruction, all throughout the 20th century. And the same story applies across the board, which is banning books is always about maintaining power and control. So if you look at all the books that are being banned, these are people who are Black, Latino, Indigenous, Asian American, LGBTQ, or some combination of the above. And these books are important to these communities because they provide important historical context, cultural context for why things are the way they are. So, when you look at the pattern, I'm a sociologist, so when you look at the patterns of how society is organized, you notice that communities of color, Latino, Black, are more likely to live in poor neighborhoods, under-resourced schools, less likely to get job opportunities. And when you remove the context, it becomes so easy for people in power to say, hey, all that stuff's happening is actually your fault, when in fact, their power is predicated on suppressing these communities.
I agree totally with you, Anthony. Anyone else?
So I would say, Anthony, one of the differences between this current wave of book banning that we're experiencing and those other moments in time, we've certainly had flare-ups in McCarthyism and that sort of thing, is that book banning has always been there, but it has been historically more on an individual basis and more on a school-by-school basis. What we're seeing now is a movement, an organized movement from that small vocal minority that is trying to assert their power because they are uncomfortable with the stories that are being shared and told. But it's an organized movement as part of a larger, ed scare to undermine both the public education system, to undermine our trust in teachers, our trust in libraries, our trust in public institutions. And so one of the things that we at PEN America are noticing is that, these books are on lists. Many times we're noticing in the challenges to books that the individual challenging them, many times, a book can be pulled from the shelf by one person, oftentimes not even a parent, who's challenging them, who's getting that list from a national organization. Oftentimes they haven't read the book, they have no invested interest in the book. And so, one of the things that we're finding very disconcerting and important to flag in this moment is that national organization. And then this additional layer of what we've seen in this last year is state governments, putting legislation behind it, so that, issues can't be taught in schools. LGBTQ plus issues can't be taught. Race and gender issues can't be taught in schools. So that additional layer is complicating it all the more.
Carrie, I know that you were creating some training for authors that you guys represent. Can you talk?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. I think I also want to add too, really quickly, that I think another reason why this is so dangerous in 2023 from a publisher perspective is that publishers should be focused on ways to advance diversity and equity within our books and author representation. And while we're in the midst of that, much more intentionally now, post 2020, we are dealing with this increased problem of threats against the very authors and the stories that we're aiming to amplify. And there's a really clear through line in that we have these pro-censorship groups predominantly targeting the narrative centered on people of color and LGBTQ individuals, and often like labeling these books as dangerous because they're highlighting issues of race and racism and sexual orientation and gender identity. So I also just wanted to elevate that. It's very interesting to see that as we're trying to promote more diversity in literature, now is when we're starting to see considerably more pushback on these very narratives and authors. So one of the things that we're doing at Hachette is making sure that we are proactively trying to make sure that our authors feel supported, educated, and kind of know just how to prepare themselves for this landscape. So we did a training courtesy of PEN America called Online Self-Defense Training. And it's really about how to protect yourself against threats online, doxing, harassment, how to make sure that your accounts are locked, when to engage with, trolls on social media, when not to. And then we did a similar training for our staff, marketers, editors, publicists, folks who are really working with the authors on the ground, so that if we do have an author who's targeted, not only do we want to make sure that that author is equipped to kind of understand what supports and resources are available, but that our staffs can interact with the authors and then sort of help work with them through the process at the same time. And it was an excellent training, I have to say. And we're hoping to do more trainings in the future, but this is one way we're hoping to tackle it from our end too.
Pickle or Ingrid, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that to add on to, I love, Brenda, that you mentioned the historical context of book banning. And specifically, you mentioned Adolf Hitler, who what's interesting to me also about the banning of books is the disconnect between the people that are facilitating the banning and their actual relationship to the material. So you mentioned Hitler, who specifically, I studied the Nazi relationship with art, and specifically visual arts and painting during the Third Reich. And something that stuck out to me in that research was that Hitler actually had a collection of paintings in his personal collection that were the style of painting that he was using to leverage against marginalized communities in Germany. And it's important, I think, to remember that the quality of the material and the impact of the material is almost detached from what the people who are trying to ban it are doing. Like, it's not, they know that the material is good and that the material is valuable, and that's why they're targeting it, because these communities that just haven't maybe had access. One of the things that, like, with Drag Story Hour we find is that a big part of the work is just meeting young people who have never met maybe a queer person or have never met a drag queen. And just meeting them creates this level of empathy. And, you know, these people that are weaponizing literature, they know that this work is not immoral and that, you know, the thing that they're saying is not true. And I think that it's important to remember that when looking at these organizations that are operating, is that like the mechanism they're using is completely just like intentional, and the people at the top are not ignorant or afraid of the work. They're just trying to use it as this tool to control populations. So that really stuck out to me from what you were saying, and remembering that for myself as well, that like, you know, because as someone who hears that language a lot, like just sort of like, oh, you're a pedophile, you're a blah, 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 blah. It starts to impact my mental health, shockingly. And I have to remember, like, they don't even believe it, you know, they're just using that language as a weapon.
Oh yeah, they know truth. They're just using it, you know, to control us. I love what you do in the school, in the libraries, Pickle, because, you know, I've always said that children are not born with hate. They learn that from their environment, their parents sometimes, you know. So I'm glad that one-on-one contact that you have with the children, it does make a difference. Ingrid, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, in terms of, you know, the writing and literature and writers themselves, I think that there has been, you know, the amount of books that we've had now that are told by, you know, queer writers of color has multiplied. And, you know, I remember when I was studying writing, that my options for, you know, what to read were limited. It was just, it's not the same amount as we have today. And I think with that rise of authors telling our own experiences and just relating to each other and saying, you know, these are the structures that I lived through, and these are the powers that affected my life. And, you know, this is what it is to be an immigrant. This is what it is to be a queer immigrant, right? Like we're just sharing our experiences and telling our stories. And the more that we have done that, then the more that has been, you know, maybe been perceived as threatening. And I think what it comes down to is that stories are powerful. And one of the main functions of stories is that they begin to serve as a sort of, you know, roadmap for what we understand the world to be. And when we're exposed to different stories and experiences, then our roadmap of what the world is widens.
Yeah, can I build on that?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I mean, I love what you were just saying, and I work closely with this organization called We Need Diverse Books, and they have a campaign right now called Books Save Lives, and it really just talks about the magic of books and storytelling, particularly for young people. And we know that when a young person sees themselves in a book that they read, it helps promote well-being, and it literally, in some cases, may even save lives. And that's so much of why I do this work, because I'm hoping to fight for access for diversity in stories, because there's real impact there. And that contradiction is so real and so interesting, because I believe that the you know, pro-censorship groups and the principal producers and defenders of censorship are based on fear, and fear sells, and it stokes social media algorithms, and there's no sort of logic or factual understanding that will likely change that, because this isn't about facts or logic or any evidence. What it really is it's talking about, you know, these underpinnings of anti-gay, anti-racist feelings. And so it's interesting when we talk about how beneficial these books are in terms of the positive and affirming experience it can have on someone's life, and that fear of loss of control of having young people access to these things that can hopefully create, expand, and build their worldview.
That's great. This is probably going to be a hard question for everyone here, but what was the book that impacted your lives that you ended up, in your career space? So it's probably going to be hard to choose, but who wants to go first?
This is the hard question because obviously there's a lot of books to choose from, but the one book where I remember vividly that feeling of like, whoa, this reading this page changed the way I see the world was Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. Like a lot of children of immigrants, my parents worked long hours, and so the library, the local bookstore, was our babysitter when they were still at work, where we had to go after school. And I remember I used to scour the shelves and pick up any book and look at, like, go straight to the index to look up the word Filipino or Philippines. And Howard Zinn's book was the first time I ever saw Filipino or Philippines actually in the index. And it wasn't just like one page, it was a lot of pages. And it gave me context. I grew up with a lot of Filipinos who were ashamed to be Filipino or ashamed of their culture, afraid to speak their parents' language. And then when I read about the violent history of US colonialism in the Philippines, it made me understand how that came to be. It wasn't just a matter of like disliking our culture. And not only that, like learning about the histories of colonialism actually helped me build a bridge between myself and my like Latino classmates who are often from countries that were also ravaged or impacted by colonialism and war. So yeah, that book really catapulted me in a direction of just being obsessed with the truth that we weren't offered sometimes in schools.
People's History is such a good choice. We had to read that in AP US history, I remember, and like talk about how it contrasted with the textbook that had been assigned to the course. And it really reveals too, like how in the educational systems, that bias, that white bias, that colonial bias just manifests itself so powerfully. And it's like, and how that functions in the classroom. So I think that's such a good choice. Personally, for me, the book that I would choose, I think just going off of, reading and the thoughts and feelings and the emotional reaction, would be The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. It was the first time that I was reading. I mean, I'm not a murderer, but I was reading this character, Sir Henry, the character in the book, who is so obsessed with language and prioritizes, the way words sound and the way that words connect to meaning over his true feelings. And I just like was so impacted by these characters that were so obsessed with, beauty and poetry. And it just like, I read it every year for like my whole college career, because there was so much more to uncover. And that's a book that was banned and was just so, and it's not even that provocative. It was just so like upsetting to people that it even felt a little queer. And I think that book really opened me up to just seeing someone who talked like that and acted like that, and it was really special.
I think for me, the Toni Morrison's Bluest Eye.
Took it.
And it's one of the books, when I look at the list of banned books, I'm always just very surprised to see it there, because I think it's just such a monumental piece of literature, and it's really a special book, really beautiful. Like all of the things that Morrison is able to do in that book is just astounding. But I read it in high school, and I'm not a Black woman, but that moment where Pecola is just, in longing for, like, she just wants her eyes to change to blue. I remember reading that and then connecting that to my life, and growing up in Colombia, in Bogota, there was one of our peers, one of our students in our year was a Colombian, blonde, blue-eyed, white person. And I just remember going through high school and this, the thing that lives in the air where white is beautiful and, she's the most beautiful and everyone else, we're just kind of like receiving the message that we are not, or, that this is what beauty is defined by. And in reading that book, I just started to look at that in a different way. Like I remember as girls, we would, like put like the bleaching lotion on our arms and like on our bodies so that we could appear whiter. And our mothers would kind of like urge us to stay out of the sun so that we wouldn't become darker. And you sort of live in the political circumstances unnamed until somebody does the work of naming them for you. And, that passage in The Bluest Eye does that naming of, there is something in culture that is privileging and is kind of teaching us that there's only one type of beauty, right? And so that, that's one of the reasons that books are so important, is that they can illuminate the circumstances that we live in. And that book certainly did that for me.
Ingrid, you totally took my that's the book that I always go to. And what's so interesting is that, we talked a little bit before, you and I had very different upbringings, right? Like I was a girl growing up in, suburban Ohio, Southern Ohio. And yet when I read the book, that exact same thing, that exact same calling happened to me, because I didn't look like the ideal of what was the ideal, the blonde and blue-eyed around me. And yet it was also just like a revisiting of the book again, as an undergraduate, allowed me to kind of understand these complex topics of race and privilege and identity and beauty and how we call ourselves and what we call ourselves to or hold ourselves to, and in a whole different way. And yet the fact that you and I could be young women reading this book, and it's speaking to us in a very specific way that is also connected, shows that real power of storytelling, and the fact that this book continues to be challenged and continues to be banned. When you think about what it does, is just it's just mind-blowing. So
yeah, I don't have the direct quote from Toni Morrison, but there's something that she said that's, I think, very relevant to our conversation about access to books and what gets printed and published. And she said something to the effect of, we do not want gatekeepers holding us back from stories and experiences that come to light because we aren't even aware of what we might be missing in American literature. And those words just hold so much power. So yeah, I was going to choose The Bluest Eye too, but I had some backups because I had a feeling that might happen. So I also was really affected by 1984 when I read it. I think I was in college, so I read it late, but it was just a really eye-opening book about the dangerous power of government and political rhetoric that kind of goes unchecked. And it always seems to kind of come back into my consciousness when reading the news or hearing something. It just always makes me remember, what things could be. But I also wanted to share something interesting, because I was looking through the list of banned books that are on Hachette's list, and this one continues to surprise me all the time. But we published Malala's biography, and Malala's book is banned for reasons, activism, gender and sexism, gun violence. And it just continues to blow my mind that you can't read Malala's book in certain school districts or cities. And to answer the question of how, it just makes me want to work harder. So I'm going to offer 1984 and Malala. So I gave you two. I kind of broke the rules, but I hope that's okay.
That's fine. And then I just wanted to share, mine was actually by Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird. And I related to it a lot. Well, obviously, you know, the social justice, and this is the line of work that I'm in, correct? But I was really a tomboy. I think I've broken a lot of what society considers what women are supposed to be like. And so I really related to Scout, the character, and climbing trees. And, you know, growing up, I would rather be in the room with my father and the men, because I thought those conversations were much more interesting than being in the kitchen and making something for those men, right? So that character just impacted me, that I was okay, you know, there's other girls out there like me, very curious. Her character is very curious, you know, storytelling, embellishing the scariness. And, you know, I just love horror movies and stories. So it really made an impact. And, you know, not that I became an attorney, but I definitely majored in poli-sci, and it has a lot to do with what I do today. So that's how powerful books are. So thank you for sharing, you know, your personal stories. What can the average viewer that's watching the show, what can they be doing about banning books? And just, I guess that's my question. How can someone participate? What can somebody do that knows that this is wrong? And what can they be doing?
Well, I started a book club with a friend where we pick a book from the banned book list and we read it together that month, and then we get together and talk about it. And yeah, our plan is to maybe each time that we meet, and maybe we invite one more person to the book club. So I think that that's something that feels very accessible to anyone who is listening. There's a power in, you know, still accessing those stories that are being banned, and, you know, becoming very familiar with what is it that we're afraid of. If you read through the book and you know, have a different relationship to it, and you know, see the value in it, you learn things from it, you know, your experience is just widened or blown open by a book, then I think then you're just more capable to be an active part of that conversation, because now you're a person who can really speak to, you know, this book is being banned, and then maybe, you know, you as a person can say like, oh, I've actually read that and this is what this book is, right? Like then we can, person to person on a small level, have an impact on what banning means and what censoring means, and our actual relationship to these stories.
I love that. To piggyback on Ingrid's call to action, I think what I tell a lot of parents who come to Drag Story Hour is that by showing up, they're doing that work. And there's so much power in modeling that behavior for kids, and just continuing to participate in the library and getting a library card, and doing something as simple as allowing your kids to read those banned books. And also I think as a white person, it's important to take stock of the impact that diversity can have on all of our lives. It's so essential to embrace diversity of stories, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it makes our society better. I remember reading Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, and it changed my life. It changed the way that I interact with the people around me. And that has been good for me and my soul and the way that I walk through the world. So remembering that this isn't just about, you know, and speaking as a queer person as well, I'm always like, drag isn't something you should celebrate because it's the right thing to do. It's something you should celebrate because it's a great art form that you can enjoy and that can make your life, enrich your life. So I think remembering that when we show up for diversity and inclusion, we show up for ourselves as well, and the people that we love. So I think keeping that in mind as well and checking that privilege is important.
I'm going to do the activist line, which is, you know, show up to your local school board meetings, vote. We're in partnership with I'm a Voter. You can text READ to 26797 and find out who's on your local school board. We all have upcoming elections, and I think it is well established that this is being run by a vocal minority. We need a more vocal majority to fight book bans, and that means getting involved on this this is a super hyper local level. And for those of you who are watching and you're like, oh, but I don't live in Texas or Florida or Oklahoma or any of those places where we're always reading about book bans. I mean, Pickle, you experienced it right here in Los Angeles, in North Hollywood, having a story hour, disrupted by a handful of protesters. It's happening in your neighborhood, regardless of where you live and how progressive you think it might be. And the way to fight it is to get involved, to write letters to your local newspaper, to pay attention to who's being elected to your local school board, to pay attention who's being elected to your local city council, and to get involved and make your voice heard as someone who understands the importance of diverse stories and understands the difference that these stories make in all of our lives.
I'm right there with you, Allison. I was going to say voting as well. Familiarize yourself with who sits on your local library and school boards. Express your views at school board meetings. And I feel that voting is probably one of the single most important civic actions any one of us can take. So vote nationally, vote locally, but vote and bring a buddy.
Yeah, I teach at a university. It's a Hispanic serving institution. 90% of my students are Latina, mostly Latino as well. And so all my readings are often from books on the list. I teach in sociology, but most of the readings I assign are actually in literature, particularly memoir. And in 2020, when we were all virtual, something happened where when people were taking class from home, they would often email me and say, oh my gosh, my mom's listening into this class. My mom is reading the reading, or my cousin was at my house when I was at the Zoom lecture and heard something you said, or picked up the book that I was reading. And it just really signaled to me how hungry people are for these stories. And so for me, because I have access to students, I always encourage them to figure out ways to spread the wealth, what they're reading, and share, have assignments where part of it is to talk about the reading with folks that are outside the university. It's been really, really exhilarating to see how, folks that felt like reading was not for them have flipped the script in their minds, because the stories that they read are centered on them now. Unfortunately, those are the books that are being banned, but yeah, that's my approach to it.
Well, we're coming to the end of our program, and I just want to give everybody some time on how somebody can reach out to you. Some of you have websites, social media, but how can somebody reach out to you and support the work that you're doing? Because you're all, warriors in your own way. And this time I'm going to start with Ingrid.
Thank you. I am on Instagram mostly. It's I__Rojas Contreras. I'm on Twitter as well. It's Ingrid_Rojas_C. And I have a website. I think generally if you type my name into Google, one of those three will come up. Okay,
and share your book again on the screen.
The Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed. It's a Latinx anthology. It has Elizabeth Acevedo in it, Naima Coster, Saresia Fennell, Lilian Rivera, and it's just a really beautiful book. We each wrote an essay about different parts of our experience of being Latinx. So I wrote about our relationship, and there's essays about anti-Black experiences and experiences with alcoholism. There's just a wide representation of of stories in there.
Excellent. And Allison, how can people support the work that PEN America is doing?
Or you can go to our website at PEN America. It's PEN America.org. All of our social is at PEN America. When this airs, we will have just published our most recent report on banned books. That's the full study of what the 2022-2023 school year looked like. So I encourage you to go to the website and check it out. Unfortunately, I think the news will not be good in that regard in terms of the growth that we're seeing and the momentum of the movement. But please go sign up. You can go to pen.org/action to get involved in our advocacy work. And that's the best way to reach us.
Very good. Pickle.
You can find me on Instagram, like Ingrid, at Pickle Drag Queen. You can also go to www.pickledragqueen.com to reach me. If you're interested in getting involved in Drag Story Hour in your area, you can go to dragsstoryhour.org and they'll be able to connect you with your local chapter, or you can start your own chapter.
That's true. Thank you. Anthony.
Yeah, I'm very much should be writing more, but I'm on social media a lot. On Twitter at Anthony Ocampo, on Instagram at anthonyocampo.phd. I'm excited to share that I have a book that's out on paperback now. It's a little love letter to queer brown folks in LA. And so there's going to be events at I'm really concentrating on like community colleges, indie bookstores, libraries. That seems to be the bulk of the events that I'm aiming to do. So I just absolutely love when folks can come through. If you want to meet in person, I'll be at those places.
Wonderful. And who published that book?
This one's with NYU Press. My next book's actually with Hachette, so I'm excited.
Oh, that's great. Anthony, we got to get in touch. Okay.
Yeah. I feel like I want to have lunch with every single person in this room.
Hey.
I know.
We'll have to have a reunion after this. And Carrie, how can people look at the books that Hachette is publishing?
So definitely go to our website, which I should know what the URL is, hachettebookgroup.com. We have a list of banned books that are available. If you want to get in touch with me directly, you are most welcome to. My work email has a pretty aggressive spam filter, so I would suggest contacting me on LinkedIn. I use my maiden name, Carrie Bloxson. You can find me there, and I do try to respond. So reach out there.
Good. Well, I just wanted to let everybody know that one of the things that NHMC did this year in 2023 was create Latino Representation in Publishing Coalition. And I just want to give a shout out to the organizations that are a part of it. Dignidad Letteria, Latino Corporate Directors Association, Latinx in Publishing, the Latinx House, Hispanic Heritage Foundation, the National Association of Latino Independent Producers, and of course, NHMC. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to chat with us today, and to our audience for staying connected to this issue. The issue is not going away, so please get involved. Make sure you subscribe to NHMC's YouTube channel to watch more episodes just like these. And don't forget to follow us on social media platforms for more information on what our organization is doing in the regards to social justice. Thank you. Until the next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.